Miyazaki was a devoted student of children's literature since his college days. He believed that Kadano's book was a fine work of children's literature, warmly depicting the gulf that exists between independence and reliance in the hopes and spirit of contemporary Japanese girls. But in translating the book to the screen, Miyazaki had to deviate from his original source material. Kadano's book was mainly a collection of short stories where Kiki, the young protagonist, encounters various people and incidents. The tone of the story is lighthearted, and nothing terrible happens to Kiki. In contrast to the final film production, the character in the book does not have problems about self-belief. She does not have to struggle with the loss of her witch's powers. The climactic finale in the film, which involves the runaway dirigible, was invented only for the movie. Such alterations were made in the film version in order to enhance Kiki's appeal for movie audiences. However, author Eiko Kadano was unhappy about the changes that were made to her original story. In fact, her disapproval was so strong that she nearly terminated the film production when she saw the final screenplay. But Miyazaki, Takahata, and producer Toshio Suzuki refused to let their new movie die easily. Together they went to Kadano's house and invited her to the studio. Only through their persuasion did Kadano finally consent to their version of the film. There was still another issue that had to be resolved. In choosing a title for her story, Kadano had borrowed the trademark name of the Yamato Transport Company for their new door-to-door delivery service and also alluded to their black cat logo. This unauthorized borrowing angered the company. Once again, Miyazaki, Takahata, and Suzuki came to the rescue. More diplomacy from these three men smoothed out the problems, and Yamato signed on as one of the movie's sponsors. In fact, the success of the movie not only garnered Yamato favorable publicity, but it also prompted Kadano to write a second book about Kiki's further adventures. This sequel, entitled Kiki and Her New Magic, involves the young witch's trials and tribulations in delivering items such as a magician's magic bag and a hippopotamus. As with Castle in the Sky, Miyazaki and his staff traveled far from Japan to develop ideas for Kiki's locations. One important setting in the film is the seaside town Kuriko, where Kiki travels to practice her witchcraft. The film staff visited Visby on the Swedish island of Gotland, as well as Stockholm, where they shot 80 rolls of film. In fact, Kuriko is mostly comprised of images from Stockholm.
It's a city floating on waves! Isn't it wonderful?
It's alright, I guess.
Miyazaki had previously visited Sweden in the 1970s in a fruitless attempt to secure series rights to Pippi Longstocking. He didn't succeed in this effort, but that first visit to Visby left a strong impression on him, which explains why most of the film's images were based upon this location. While Kiki's delivery service was a hit, it created new problems for Studio Ghibli. Now that it was clear that Ghibli would be around for some time, the company had to resolve issues in securing and adequately compensating a permanent staff. One problem arose because of the method by which animators were usually paid for their work. For their earlier projects, Ghibli's animators were paid according to the number of pieces drawn or painted. Because the production standards for Kiki's delivery service were so high, the animators required twice as much time to complete each piece. As a consequence, the artists earned only half as much money per hour, even though they were producing outstanding animation. In order to maintain the high standards desired for future films, some changes had to be made for compensating animators. Miyazaki came up with two solutions. One, introduce full-time employment at a fixed pay, effectively doubling staff salaries, and two, recruit staff on a regular basis and provide a training program. These suggestions enabled the studio to continue producing consistently high-quality animated features while also maintaining a solid animation staff. When production began on the next Studio Ghibli film, Isao Takahata's Only Yesterday, Miyazaki's recommendations were fully implemented. The staff now experienced full-time employment, they received an animation training program, and they had regular annual salaries. Only Yesterday tells the story of Takeo, a young woman periodically reminiscing about her childhood while traveling through Japan. The film is based on a manga written by Hotaru Okamoto, which is a compilation of short stories taken from her own experiences as an 11-year-old in 1966. It is notable for making nostalgic nods to the songs, movies, TV programs, and popular idols of that time. Because there was no plot to hold a feature-length film, however, Takahata experienced problems in converting the manga into a movie. Since the manga was told in the form of a memoir, he decided to introduce an adult Takeo to serve as the narrator. Toshio Suzuki, the producer for Only Yesterday, used his experience acquired in the printing industry to promote the film in issues of Animage when it was released to theaters in 1991. This made Only Yesterday another box office smash for Studio Ghibli, as well as the top-grossing movie of the year. Thanks to the revenues from this success, Miyazaki was able to maintain his goal of keeping a permanent staff of animators at Studio Ghibli. The following year saw the release of Hayao Miyazaki's next feature, Porco Rosso, also known as Kurenai no Buta, or The Crimson Pig. This high-flying adventure takes place in the post-World War I Mediterranean, depicting an era when sky pilots and their planes ruled the wind and waves. It became an instant hit, surpassing all movies released in 1992, including Steven Spielberg's Hook and Disney's own Beauty and the Beast. Porco Rosso is an unusual entry in Miyazaki's collective works. Its protagonist is not a plucky youth or a courageous adolescent, but rather a disillusioned grown-up with the face of a pig, or, if you will, a pig-headed grown-up. Casting a pig in the role of a hero is a testament to Miyazaki's fascination with pigs. According to Miyazaki scholar Helen McCarthy, in the context of this film, the word pig is specifically linked to tired, middle-aged men who have lost touch with the golden optimism of their youth and can no longer imagine themselves ideal heroes who will always win the race and get the girl.
Porco, why did you turn into a pig?
All middle-aged men are pigs.
But Porco Rosso offers more than Miyazaki's long-time dream to make a movie about pigs. In addition to being a soaring action adventure and a comic love story, the film is something of a testament to Miyazaki's fascination with women as strong role models. The sequence where the woman of the Piccolo family rebuild Porco's plane is an example of his views on feminism. In fact, some fans have theorized that the scenes in the Piccolo factory were really set in Studio Ghibli, given that many of the film's principal staff are women.
Women are great. Don't be such a pig.
Initially, Miyazaki wanted to set Porco Rosso in a Croatian city. However, after the civil war broke out in the former Yugoslavia, Miyazaki was so upset that he decided to change the film's main location to an island in the Adriatic Sea. Originally, Porco Rosso was intended to be a 30 to 45-minute featurette for Japan Airlines domestic flights. But as production progressed, Miyazaki's imagination took flight, and what would have been a charming little distraction for tired business people in a stuffy airplane cabin became a much bigger project. In the end, Porco Rosso was extended to a full-length feature film. Not long after Porco Rosso was released, a new facility was built for Studio Ghibli in the western suburbs of Tokyo. The construction of this new building was personally supervised by Miyazaki himself. It was set around trees and surrounded by nature, Miyazaki's ideal environment, and the women's washrooms were double the size of men's. Another reflection of Miyazaki's feminism. As Porco Rosso continued to set new records, the company set up in its new home. And it was there that Ghibli was able to continue building on its success with their subsequent features.